Good evening again, gentlemen and ungentlemen. Here's the Osborne one that we need to do a little bit of testification on. This is a later model that has a different faceplate thing on it, and there's the keyboard. As you can see, it has an extremely large screen. I think it's 52 by 16 or something like that characters. Crazy. But it maps onto a larger area of video RAM. The whole video area is like 132 by 50 or something like that. So you've got this little window into this bigger screen that you have to move around. Apparently, I've never used one of these, but it sounds like a real pain in the ass. Which is why I'm a little more interested in the K-Pro, to be honest with you. But this will still be a very interesting project, and if nothing else, we can probably get a Z Machine interpreter running in 52 columns and play lots of fun interactive fiction on this portable computer. So there's the board. It has this daughter board on it, which I think is a double density expansion, but it's a factory expansion, I think, for this like later model Osborne one. So I assume that means it's still got single-sided drives, but double density, so they're probably going to be like 140K, I think. Maybe they are double-sided. I don't know. We'll have to look at them here after a while. But other than that, everything appears to be, stock and all that. So an interesting thing here, it takes the video out to this external video connector, and then there's this pass-through plug that passes it on to the internal CRT. So I guess when you plug in an external monitor, you pull this plug off of here, and it plugs in there, and you don't have anything on the internal CRT. Alright, here's the here's the Osborne one main board, and that's that double density disk drive adapter. It plugs down into the floppy thingaroo, and then this ribbon cable, I guess, pulls some signals off of the floppy controller and brings them over here. I haven't looked up any documentation for that, so I couldn't tell you. It's got a couple of ROMs on it. I assume one of them's a character ROM and the other one's just the boot ROM. For CPM, it has to boot off of a ROM, and then CPM keeps some shit down in the 0 page, or whatever you call it on the Z80. So the ROM has to bank out to the RAM, and there's a bunch of RAM over here. I think these have 64K on them. It's got a little internal speaker here, so that's kind of neat, unless you can't turn it off, in which case that's not so neat. This here is a really short SIO chip of some kind. I've never seen a little one like that. I thought at first that maybe that was some kind of like the Z80 SIO that you always see. It has like two serial ports in one chip, and I thought maybe since that one was so much smaller that it only implemented a single serial port, but it's got two serial ports down here. One regular DB25 one, and then this other DB9 connector that goes to a modem. But actually, yeah, the same RX and TX lines go from the regular serial port to that DB9 connector. So that's not a regular DB9 serial port. That's just something special for plugging in this funny, where did I put it? Modem thing that goes inside one of the little disk drive keeper things in the front, and then plugs into that port. So that's kind of interesting. Completely useless in this day and age, but interesting nonetheless. These two chips here are PIO chips, parallel IO chips, presumably for dealing with the keyboard and probably a bunch of other stuff. Probably one pin off of these runs the speaker, I imagine, and whatever else. Some of them are probably used for floppy drive controller signals. In fact, this one here probably is what interfaces it to the FDC would be my guess. I haven't looked at the schematics, but it sure as shit looks like there are a lot of traces going between those two. So, yeah. And then here's a 15 megahertz crystal, 15.9744, which that's the only crystal that I see on the board, so it must derive its video and system clocks from the same crystal some way. I guess that's close enough to 16 megahertz that they divided down to just a little bit under 4 megahertz to clock the CPU with. So that'll have to be the CPU there. D780C-1, I guess that's just some off-brand Z80. It's an NEC chip rather than a Z-Log chip. So that's kind of interesting. Everything appears to be perfectly stock, and there have been no expansions added to this thing. So after having a closer look at these disk drives, they appear to be powered over the ribbon cable. That's the only connection back to the rest of the machine that they have. So those are not going to provide a load to the power supply without the motherboard connected. And additionally, it appears that the CRT analog board is also powered over this connector that plugs into the motherboard. So we have no load for the power supply. So it's probably not going to come up, but I'm going to try to bring it up anyway. And maybe if we have to, we can plug like a case fan or something into it, just for enough load to start. Or I've probably got like a half watt 1 meg resistor around here somewhere. That would probably be sufficient. I guess we might as well try it and see what happens. Orange is the ground, yellow is 5 volts, and red is 12 volts, I think. And then there's a negative 12 volt line on there as well that doesn't appear to be used. So let's power up the Variac, power up this thing, and it's probably not going to do anything, although we may hear some clicking as the switch thing tries to start. Let's see what happens here. Or we may see some smoke. Okay, it came up to 5 volts. I'm going to turn it on up to 120. Let's switch over to the 12 volt rail here and watch it. Okay, it's outputting 12 volts already. Bring it up to line voltage here. It should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 120. Well, that's something. No smoke. I mean, smoke's kind of exciting, but that's good that it didn't, right? 5.3 volts, that's a little high, although the power supply's unloaded. It'll probably go down a little bit when the power supply's loaded, right? So, okay, good enough. Oh, okay, let's not plug the disk drives in. Let's just plug in the motherboard and the video connector and see what happens. So here's a neat little feature. I mean, it's obvious which way this goes back on the board, but they wired this connector in such a way that you can't plug it in backwards. It'll supply the right voltages regardless of which way it's plugged in. So that's pretty cool. Alright, shitty phone video again. So I'm going to turn the brightness and the contrast all the way up and make sure that that thing's sitting on those doohickeys like it should be. We don't want the frame to be touching something that it shouldn't, and I'm going to bring it up on the Variac again just to make sure that if something smokes on the video board we can cut it off real quick. So let's bring it up nice and slow, shall we? I'm very nervous. I don't feel any static electricity on. the screen yet. Well, well, well. That screen is blurry as hell, but maybe there's a focus control on that somewhere. Well, I'll be darned. The ROM works anyway. Huh. Well, that's something. And the screen, of course, that's excellent. Now, I thought these things had amber CRTs in them. That's interesting that this has a white one. I'm a little bit disappointed, but you know, that's fine, I guess. That's a cute little screen. That's kind of neat. Well, huh. Well, it appears that all of the important stuff on this thing works too. I mean, it's pretty easy to replace power supplies, but the CRT stuff, the CRT analog stuff, is what always worries me, because you can't find the right flybacks for these things anymore and stuff. So once that stuff dies, you're done, right? But this one appears to work. Excellent. I'll bet the keyboard is jacked up. Jerry Walker is working on one of these on his YouTube channel right now, and he also had a faulty keyboard, and when he took his apart, it looks to me like probably a pretty common mode of failure for these things. So I suspect that I will be working on this one's keyboard as well when the time comes. But all of that is presumably fixable. We've got high voltage on the CRT, so that's the main thing I wanted to check. Alright, I guess I better put this thing back together, because it's going to be a while before we get to it. I'm going to work on the K-Pro before I mess around with this thing. Thanks for joining me, gentlemen. This is very exciting, and even though it doesn't have an amber CRT. Alright, cool. See you later.